Here we are, week 2 in the war with Iran. We have no real idea of why we are at war with Iran at this point. We have no off-ramp and we have no accountability. What I'm going to bring to you tonight is my own personal prediction. All the experts on all the expert shows, when asked the question, how does this war end? They claim they have no way of knowing. Well, if you want to know how the war ends, well, you've come to the right place, because I'm going to tell you how it is. Here's my idea of how the war ends. I feel that in 2 weeks, Trump will just basically withdraw. The reason I think that is very simple. This is like Occam's razor, where the most simple explanation is often the best explanation. I think he has a very short attention span. I think he will grow bored. I think there's pressure. The only 2 things that he owned and hung his hat on was the fact that the stock market was doing well, although I don't think he had very much to do with that. And the price of gasoline was down, also not much to do with that. But he did take credit for it. Fair enough. All presidents do. Both of those are in a bad spot. Stock market is down. Gasoline price is up. This bothers him. I don't think he has any real plan. I don't think he thinks ahead 2 steps. I don't think he thinks ahead 1 step. I think it all comes down to him just at one point finally having enough and saying, we're out of there. And I don't think he thinks a lot about the consequences. What's your thought on that?
So there's a lot to, as the punditry loves to say, there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah. So your prediction essentially is that Trump, either through a combination of being people criticizing him and not really wanting to deal with now that this is more of an actual, not that they'd ever admit it, but crisis, and something that they probably think is blowing up in their faces, which I think that it is. You're essentially saying that he's going to do the rational thing and take an off ramp if he can get it, and get this thing off of his plate as quickly as he can.
Well, not to put too
is it-
fine a point. No, yeah, not to put too fine a point on it. I think he's just going to say, screw it. It may
okay.
seem like a rational decision.
I see. Now that's where I'm with you, because that definitely to me would be the rational thing given the situation, regardless of, like, we could sit here and we probably will talk a lot more in detail about the overall, more dire ramifications of the war here in a minute, and we can get a little bit more detailed. But just like, I just wanted to make sure everybody understood, and that I understood exactly where you were. I don't think that's impossible. I don't want to pretend like that you're engaged in some fantasy, and I'm not sure how the war ends, and if it ends, and I thought that the war was a very stupid, rash, dangerous thing to do way before it happened, and just the idea of it, and knowing a bit about Iran and its, sort of capabilities, its size, its military capabilities, and the ability. And I think its proxies may have been weakened, that they're not completely vanquished, and you see, dangerous activity between Hezbollah and Israel. Anyway, long story short is, I don't know. I think a rational administration would figure out how to claim victory, de-escalate this, and bring about, if not a complete end, but a sort of, end the direct hostilities, allow for the resumption of trade and oil and all that stuff, and because there's no question that, regardless of what your political stripe is, that the economic impact of this thing is huge, and we can get to that in a minute. But here's my counter to you, Tom, which is why I can't just jump on the bandwagon completely and say that I think that 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 they're going to end it. Is there's so much that they do that's irrational, and attacking Iran to begin with was completely irrational. They had 2 fucking real estate developers negotiating with the Iranians. But and all that being said, and all of the conflicts of interest that Jared Kushner has there, and the money that he derives from the Middle East, and the people that are around the same freaking table as they're negotiating the interests of the United States. Um, you know, is the irrationality of Trump and the people around him, and the idea that they were going to go in there and do the same thing that they did in Venezuela, and have no concept of like who Iran is, the regime, and just like look at the simple fact they were completely unprepared for Iran shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. And I don't know if they'll do the rational thing and find an off ramp. In some ways, they're escalating. They're sending additional ground troops to, you know, there. I hope. I mean, I think that, you've already had a lot of deaths across. You've had probably, I don't know, I don't want to misquote numbers, but I think certainly significant casualties in Lebanon, hundreds, if not maybe even thousands there. A lot of like indiscriminate killing. Thank you, IDF. Thanks, Israel, for doing that again. But then you've got thousands killed in Iran. You've got, now, if we can even trust their numbers, you've got, numerous U.S. servicemen, maybe at this point as many as 13, 15. You've got people killed across, the region. You've got, I think, 16.
Hundreds wounded, 100 American servicemen wounded.
Yeah. Well, yeah, well in excess of 100. And so, I don't know. I don't know. I could also see something causing this to escalate. I do think ultimately, uh, well, it'll hurt all of us, because even now it takes sometimes, if not weeks, even months to get a lot of these systems back online and running. So if you look at, because this all became a choke point. You had 20% of the world's oil getting choked off and causing the systems that supply it to start scaling back and even shutting down production entirely. So you've got wells that take time to, and expense and mess to restart. Then you've got the same thing with, storage and refineries, et cetera. So like, there's an oil shot going on. It's getting really bad. Every day it gets worse. And it's not, plus you've got just like the whole question of, when does Grandpa, dementia Trump decide to attack the next country, or, do this? He has no regard for anyone, for U.S. service people. He has no regard for the markets, no regard for inflation. This is going to cause inflation to spike big time.
Well, everything is going to go up in price because everything has to be moved, right? So, you're going to expect to see prices increase. It'll be inflationary. And it's not going to go down right away. This is why I think, in a best case scenario right now, honestly, if he stopped bombing and said, we're done tomorrow, he would do himself a favor. You keep saying the word rational. I don't
He
think in
would.
any way this is
He
a
would be.
I don't think in any way this is a rational decision. Trump is very image conscious. He has to basically, and he will do so. He will make it so that this was a total victory, and in some ways it was. He certainly degraded their capability. He took out their leader, but he made the problem worse in the end, in the long term. Certainly, there is absolutely no argument that the number one priority they're going to have going forward is to get a nuclear weapon. They know at this point that any kind of treaty, any kind of agreements are just worthless. They know that the only way you can prevent your country from being bombed is to have a nuclear weapon. So they are going to basically be hard pressed on this. It's going to require a lot of intelligence to basically make that difficult. to happen. But they've now got allies that are going to do, who are nuclear powers, that are going to do their best to basically help these people out. It's not a good situation. I do think there's going to be some kind of horrific attack at one point, perhaps on American soil, perhaps in, more likely in bases, American bases over. I don't think there's any way to avoid that at this point. I think Iraq, basically, if we were to pull out even tomorrow, they would just basically lay low. I think the oil would start flowing again. I think they would go toward rearming, and I think they would plot their revenge. I really do. The world's a more dangerous place at this point. I don't think that there's any way you can argue against that. At least we would prevent, if we pulled out tomorrow, for example, we would prevent hopefully any more Americans from getting killed, American military getting killed, and we wouldn't be bombing any more schools.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to argue with your core points there. I mean, I think that uh, I think we have created just an unimaginable amount of risk going forward for the country and for all of us. But it's yes, I mean, some of it's economic, and I think there's going to be economic ramifications from this. I'm not so sure will just be a short-term shock. And of course, that's assuming the war ends tomorrow. I think there's a more strategic time frame here where, because I mean, and I think you said or alluded to some of this. Iran has been diminished but not destroyed. Iran is, you'd almost have to kill the country
That's
and
right.
demolish the entire country to get rid of
That's
the
right.
of the IRGC and the regime's control over the country. And as long as they're around, they're going to deny the Strait of Hormuz, and they're most likely going to be able to do that no matter what you do, whether they're having to use small boats, drones, you name it. That's the geography, and then the counter to that militarily, the next step is boots on the ground. The United States doesn't really have we don't have great drone technology when it comes to like
Yeah,
modern drone warfare.
let's
It's
get to
not a
that.
good, yeah. And my point is more simple is that we're not in a position, we made many strategic mistakes going into it. We didn't give consideration to Iran's capabilities, their size, the geography of everything that we're talking about. And they just thought that they could achieve dominance and regime change through bombing. And nothing in history really proves that out. It just doesn't work that way.
Yes, it's
And so
not.
they've angered the regime. They've damaged the regime for sure, diminished maybe, but they're not going to stop. They haven't lost control over society, and I say that with all regret because they're awful. I don't in any way endorse them, but they're formidable, and we've angered them. We've probably, and I'll tell you this. I want to make this point. The more we bomb schools and kill school children, the more we are creating generations of people in the Middle East who will hate the United States and will welcome the opportunity to try to make the United States pay a price, and there will be further radicalization and all of those things. And it's like, and whatever you want to call it, a mistake, just, stupidity, incompetence, whatever, like, and that's the problem with war in the Middle East. It was a war of choice. We shouldn't be in this war. It's an illegal war. We're committing war crimes every day that we're prosecuting this war. Donald Trump is committing war crimes. Pete Hegseth is committing war crimes. And many within his chain of command are committing war crimes by, you know, through various in terms of, various ways to look at it. I mean, the war itself, but also the way that we're prosecuting the war. yeah, that's where we stand today.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that they're going to, if they do anything, what may be announced this week, especially considering you've got 2,500 sailors and 2,500 Marines going over there, is that they're going to try to basically secure Karg Island, and that's where you're going to see troops on the ground, which I think is going to result in additional military deaths. But I think their goal there would be to control Karg Island, which is basically 90% of the revenue stream for Iran, try to choke them off that way and then bring them to the table in some form or fashion, which I do think is going to be futile. I don't think that that's actually going to work. You're not going to really address the issue with the crude oil cost now that we're seeing. We're still going to see that continue. It's going to be bloody. But I do think, I mean, Trump, there is a clip of him mentioning Carg Island back, I'm going to say in the 80s. It's that long ago. So he's aware of it. It's on his mind. I think that might be what we see. But
Well, but I'm not saying you're wrong, and you may be right. Again, I hesitate to try to think about what might make sense to another administration that had a reason to, go to war with
no, no, no.
Iran.
I don't
But
think another
but
administration would have ever started this.
no, I'm just saying, like, even if they did, because here's the thing, I don't, I mean, I can guess their end game in terms of, they wanted to take down Iran. He wanted probably, quite honestly, let's face it, he probably wanted to see how much of their oil he could direct to his bank account or whatever the fuck he's doing with
Yep,
Venezuela
yep,
and whatever else.
yep.
He's always sort of had a lot of disdain and almost hatred for, and we all know that he doesn't care about anybody else but himself. So it's not like he cares about what happens with the Iranian people. But I think he's made a lot of miscalculations. I think they're stronger and more capable militarily. They've not been, degraded to the point where they're not functional. They're still able to carry out offensive operations.
Mhm.
I don't think, and with regard to Karg Island, if they go after Karg, and they may do it, but the blowback there is that you now both India, China, other countries in the Pacific, other buyers of Iranian oil are going to be very unhappy, and you're going to right now the market's discounting the production of. I mean, they're discounting the fact that no Middle Eastern oils going through the strait, and essentially the whole region is more or less shut down, except for Iranian oil. Then you take the Iranian oil offline, and you add that to the overall shock to the system. You could be looking at $200 a barrel oil, $5-6 gasoline heading into the midterm elections.
No, yeah, I didn't say it would be a good idea, and that's why no other administration has.
Yeah, I'm not saying you were saying that either. I'm just saying, yeah, those are the problems or some of the problems with it. And also, I think Iran would strike back vociferously. They certainly
Yeah,
wouldn't, they wouldn't give up.
we
They
would
wouldn't,
literally,
yeah.
any military there because they bombed what they say are the military.
Unless we invaded the rest of Iran and essentially like completely toppled the government, they would be interdicting the Strait of Hormuz until their dying breaths. And so, I think it bakes it like that. Like I said, I see the possibility for like the real long-term problem here. I think the region has been destabilized, and I think it was a stupid thing politically. Like, if any of what I just laid out comes true, like, they're just gonna get killed in the midterms. They're gonna get absolutely slaughtered, and if they try to do too much cheating, they'll have millions of people out in the street, ready to take their government back. But, like, so but I don't think that I think they're gonna pay most of that price anyway. The damage has been done.
I
I don't
yeah,
think it'll get resolved quickly,
no,
because that would require a ceasefire that I'm not sure that the Iranians are motivated to do now. And I think it would be Trump. I think they have the leverage now. I think their failure to actually, kill the regime, like overthrow the regime, which they weren't going to do with bombs, then, here they are. So, yeah, they've punished Iran significantly through the air and have degraded a lot of capabilities. But I think Iran's resourceful. I think that they have certainly hidden stockpiles and things that we don't know about or haven't hit. And then they have the ongoing drone capabilities that I don't think are going to stop, you know. Yeah.
It's,
So,
I mean, if there's a lesson learned for any kind of future administration, any future DoD head, is that the way of war has changed. We're now in a drone war time, basically. At there's always going to be a place for missiles, but whenever you're basically firing, $1 million+ missile that takes over a year to make against $1,000 drone that they can churn out thousands a month, the math is not there. This this is a time, and for a $1 trillion Department of Defense budget, which is insane. This is the takeaway here, that the way we've done war, and the way we've planned war, and the way we've built our military and our arsenal up is due for a radical facelift.
yeah, yeah, no, there's for sure a huge cost imbalance when you look at the technologies versus drones that can be produced at 40,000, 20,000, and probably, some of them even, in the handful of $1,000 for different capabilities. And that's only, I mean, unfortunately, I don't think it's a good thing for humanity, but I think it's going to get even cheaper.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at it is different, and we don't have that experience. We don't have the manufacturing capability to deal with it. We don't have anything. And that's where I think, if Iran decides to grind this out, and then, the cost will be very high to us already. We pulled the entire system out of South Korea, leaving them vulnerable. And at some point, Israel's going to go low on some of this stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's a whole different conversation. I know that we got to pull this to a close, but, yeah, I think that this is the thing to be watching right now, aside from all the other crap that they're trying to pull. We can't ever forget that they're, trying to figure out how to rig the election. They're trying to figure out how to cheat. They're breaking the law every single minute of every single day. With regard to the war, let's not just remind ourselves that this is an illegal war. This is a war that's not authorized by Congress, that the actions that they're taking, including Pete Hegseth saying that we should give no quarter, to which is a clear war crime in and of itself. They've blown up boats. They've engaged in war without going to Congress for authorization, and they at some point need to be held accountable. We have a whole large section of this administration that are guilty of war crimes as we speak.
Without a
So,
doubt. And let's not forget that here at home, the Epstein files, they've done an excellent job of distracting us from that.
but yeah, it's become more and more apparent what the truth is there is that, Trump was in every way involved in and up to his eyeballs in the whole Jeffrey Epstein matter, and that they're suppressing evidence.
They're
Oh, yeah,
still
no,
withholding.
they
They've got
so
half they
there's
haven't even
yeah,
released in violation of the law.
let's not limit the jail time and the sentencing required to just the Department of Defense, whose pathetic drunk leader insists on calling it the Department of War, which is pathetic, as is most of his behavior. He's in over his head. He's incompetent.
That's right.
He's a bitter, paranoid, vainglorious, alcoholic, maniac, and assaulter of women. Yeah, but I mean, like, I don't know what else we would expect with that type of leadership, and it's really dangerous. And it's going to impact us economically for sure. And it's just overall, it's just a terrible situation. Our allies are abandoning us and refusing to back us up on this because we're so off
It's not good.
base, and it's just a debacle and a disaster and a self-inflicted wound by these extremists, these religious extremists we have here at home called MAGA and MAGA Inc. And yeah, it's all part of the plan. Hey, listen, if this resonates with you, if you like this, please hit like, subscribe, check us out on YouTube and pretty much any platform where you watch or listen to your podcasts. And also, please visit us on Substack at The Reset or eattheoligarchy.substack.com. And we'd love to see you there and any comments you might have for us. We'll keep you updated on what's happening with the war, and we're going to have a bunch more coming out this week. So hit us up.
All
Thanks.
right. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.